They got all the bedrooms upstairs done. So, and they'd like to knock on the wall between the dining room and the kitchen. It's like, is that over-bearing? I don't know. But it'll be fine.
My dad's taking his first run at Kensington.
Yeah, right.
It should be good. She moved
So
on.
it's
She was taking I think that's the way it works. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Hi, Joyce.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Hey, Joyce.
Good, where are you?
I'm good.
He just moved to Ashburn. So
Yeah.
it's just like half a block.
That's weird.
I just came from watching them today, and their daycare was closed for Columbus Day. I did, Michelle.
For
Want everybody's right questions down?
make this stand up.
Hey now. This is number 4 and 5. I'm a little tired.
Yeah, I bet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, other than the back makes me really old, but okay with it.
Oh, no.
Scott, do you want a card? Or cards? Some generate questions?
Yeah.
Here you go.
What?
Yeah.
And then after you really are by your, you
Right.
And we're taking
Yes,
questions by
it's
cards
fun.
tonight. So
We did crafts on one. I bought a stack of just those white paper plates, and I went on Pinterest, and oh my gosh, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of stuff. Oh, yeah, I didn't think of those.
Ours didn't blow away.
But I bought some little tiny pumpkins too, and they painted them, or they used markers, or whatever, you know, Hoyer's only, he'll be 2 years old. And Crosby won't be 4 till February, and then she's expecting her 3 in January. And they're building a house, and she's still a pharmacist in Glenwood, so she's a busy mama. Yeah, so yeah, we had so much fun, and I painted their feet and made the ghosts, you know, and what else did we make? Oh, just all kinds of paper chains, because then we did the, Crosby and I, while Hoyer was sleeping, we did the,
hello.
you know, color, paper chains.
Thank you. We're taking
You know, it's
questions by
like orange, yellow, red, orange, yellow. Really good at it. Thanks. He's a whip.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, too.
I was very much not paying attention until it was
So many students, we do get a lot of that. So the kids, I was going to go run Walmart.
All right, well, I think I'll get tonight started if that's all right with everybody. Good evening, I'm Michelle Messman. I'm the WCA School Board Chair. I've got Superintendent Hoagie with me tonight. I've got Tony Wolf from Zerberg Architects, and I've got Steve Gertz from Gertz Construction. That's always a mouthful. I also have Jill Amundsen and Deb Engel with me tonight. They'll be moderating tonight. You have been given little note cards that you can write questions on. 1 question per note card, because what they do is they organize them. That way they don't duplicate asking the same question. They kind of try and categorize questions into similar themes. But you can bring those note cards up at any point in time while we're talking tonight. And then at the end, we'll do a question and answer. And Darren Gross, sorry, with the West Central Area School Board. He's kind of hiding in the back room. Back of the room. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about how we got here. If we go way back about 10 years, our district put a single site option on the ballot. That failed. Then we put a 3-site option on the ballot. That was not successful. Revisited things, had some changes. We had a new superintendent that joined us. Started revisiting these discussions 1.5, 2 years ago. And continuing the discussions that the board had over the last couple of years to identify a solution within our district for our aging facilities and then other programming needs that we had throughout the district. We went through the vote last November, which was not successful, tabled things for a few months to visit some other areas, as everyone knows, as we've gone through 2020 and gotten into the beginning of 2021. COVID protocols and things like that have been on our plate, and we've been focusing on what we do within our schools and getting kids back into the classrooms again. Phase 1 of the referendum for this year started May, June of this year. And we started with information gathering and really looking at all of the potential options that we had to work with. Really not taking anything off the table, but going back to square one again. And being as thorough as we could about discussion of the pros and cons of all different options. Whether that was addition, that was renovation, that was remodeling, building new, all of the above. Nothing was off the table for the board. So we did a couple of things to solicit feedback from the community. Our goal is to get it right this time. So one of the things that we did was a community group public input meeting. That was in May. Back in March, we also did a public hearing at the school, which is the first time in all the years I've been on the board that we've done that, where individuals could come speak to the board. It was a listening session for the board for people to express how they felt about the questions that were presented in November of 2020. So public hearing in March, and then as we got to May, we pulled together an eclectic group of individuals from all 5 of our communities, from all ends of the district. That included people from city council members to people that were parts of fire department, Lions Club, farmers, people that lived within town, lived out of town. We had about 40 individuals sitting in the room, and that was another listening session for the board where we talked through the different questions that were presented in November of 2020 and solicited feedback from that group. There were a couple of important things that came as a result of that discussion. One of them being that people advocated to bring 5th grade back to our elementary schools, which is not an easy task considering that we're running out of space. South didn't have any additional classroom space to accommodate that request. And then also just really looking at, besides bringing 5th grade back, holistically what the program needed to look like for our district. What are the long-term solutions, not just looking at what's right in front of us. Okay? So then we also had a meeting with administration, faculty, and staff to validate what we needed for space and what we needed for the program. So we looked at square footage. We asked some key questions of community members, such as, does the program at North, do you feel, need to look the exact same as South? And the answer that came back was no. We know that there are more kids that attend North Elementary than attend South Elementary, so build the program to what you need. And as we get into looking at things today, you're going to see something like a 65,000 square foot plan for North and a 58,000 square foot plan for South that did just that. Looked at exactly what we needed with those 2 buildings respectively, but not related to each other, not equal space, what we needed for those buildings. So we did that community meeting, administration was there, faculty members were there, we had special education representatives, we had people that were on the maintenance department there, we had teachers from all 3 of the different buildings, we had the school board present, we had Sarahberg Architects there, we had Gertz Construction there, superintendent, a really diverse group, and we literally went space by space throughout the 2 elementary schools and identified what was missing, what was not needed, and adjusted the floor plans for those buildings. Okay? So that brought us up to phase 2, which was July-August timeframe. We looked at our final options, discussing single site, 3 sites, what did our community want us to put on the ballots. We refined our plan in July. We voted unanimously, 7-0, to move forward with a 3-site option that's going to go on the ballot. Some of you probably, if not all of you, received your ballots already. Looked at developing the review and comment that goes down to the Minnesota Department of Education and developing the public informational brochure that goes out. In addition to that, we start planning these community meetings that we do in all 5 of our communities and what needed to go on the school website and the newspaper to inform our public. Phase 3, which is the phase that we're in right now, September, October, this is what we call the pre-referendum phase. We hold all of our community meetings. This is meeting number 4 of 5. Barrett on Wednesday is our last community meeting. If this was a lot of information, or you think of questions and you want to attend another community meeting, you guys are welcome to do that. The 3 prior community meetings have all been recorded. You can also watch those on our referendum page on the website if you want to see some of the questions that were asked. Go back, review some of this information again. All right. As we get into this next slide, we're going to look at this again at the very end of the presentation, but there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out. One of those being, it was very intentional of the board to put 3 separate questions on the ballot. We realize that some people are passionate about all 3 of these questions, and some people are passionate about 1 or 2 of these things and maybe not all 3. So it gives people the ability really to look exclusively at each individual question. They're not contingent on each other. There are 3 separate questions on the ballot this year. Voting is done by mail-in ballot. That was also intentional by the board. When I first started on the board, they had just come out of a referendum vote that was in a year similar to this one, where it wasn't presidential election, it wasn't a normal election type year where governor's up for election. It was a special election. And at that time, voters went to Barrett to vote. Some people were okay with that. Some people were really upset at the fact that I have to physically get in my car, drive to a location that may not be convenient for me with as big as our district is. Coming out of a year like last year, and people still being aware of COVID-19 also, mail-in ballots kept everyone at the space that they wanted to be with the ability to vote without having to go into a public place. So I'm going to pass things over to Tony to talk a little bit about this next slide.
Thanks. So, as we were going through these community meetings and the meetings with staff, we came up with what we would maybe call guiding principles, just of things that were goals and aims of things to be achieved as we move forward with the design, and really to help inform decisions that are made throughout the process. So the first item is really just updating building systems and infrastructure, getting all the fresh air requirements, conditioning the spaces, and providing IT and enhancing the operational efficiency of the building to a level of that we're seeing now with newer buildings that we build today. Second, we talked about safety to the building, access to the site, separating out your bus and your car traffic, and really making that front entrance a location where you have the office up front, you have a secure vestibule that you have to come through the office, and also providing a lot of windows on that front out of the offices so that you have kind of this passive and active observation and security, so people think that somebody might be watching out that window, although somebody might not be at that time. So really kind of focusing on how we can improve the safety of the students, because it's a concern no matter where you're at, whether it's a big city or a small city, and it's obviously important for everybody with a child. So third, we looked at providing spaces for collaboration and active learning, and providing the tools that help support current curriculum delivery. So getting some of those spaces where students can come out and do larger activities together, and have a place where you can store those activities outside of the classroom, because sometimes those activities take a little bit more space than what a normal classroom can provide. So you're not having to do that in the hallway or in the lunchroom and those sorts of things. So it provides an extra space within the building to do some of those activities. And then expanding and improving the co-curricular spaces that accommodate all activity levels and levels of participation. So things like improving the tennis courts, improving or providing your track at the high school, those sorts of things. And we'll get in a little bit more into that on a future slide here. But I think, again, the main takeaway was that we really were trying to create these around the impact or the feedback that we had received at those meetings. Michelle?
Great, so the next couple of slides address the decision to move South Elementary from Kensington to Hoffman, which was not an easy decision to get to. There's a few different factors that played a role in that, but the discussion really started when one of the board members asked the question, where's our student population? And so they took our existing K-5 students, mapped them, created these concentric circles. If you look at Elbow Lake, you have 117 students within a 1 mile radius. If you look at Kensington, there's 19 students within a 1 mile radius. Now when we start moving that circle and looking at Hoffman, there's 72 students within a 1 mile radius of Hoffman. So one of the things that parents stated that they valued that was not One of the reasons why they were not necessarily a big fan of moving, to a single site option was the ability to walk kids to school. And so it does increase the number of students that have that opportunity with the location being in Hoffman. One of the other factors that also played a role in that was looking at the development of the land and how much development would need to be done. So with Hoffman, we looked at about 5 different locations where an elementary school could be located, and the same with Kensington. It did come down to a couple of different options. The Hoffman location, the site itself, it's very flat land. It doesn't require significant development to put a building there. And the city of Hoffman's done a good job creating infrastructure for growth for that town. Water and sewer already run up to where the elementary school would be located. Whereas in Kensington, not only would those taxpayers have incurred the cost of the bond from the school referendum, but also the cost of having to run utilities out to another site. So those were a couple of factors that played a role in there in the decision to put South Elementary in Hoffman.
Okay, I'm just going to run through the ballot questions and what these buildings or sites will look like potentially with passage of each one of these. So ballot question number 1 obviously is for the North Elementary School improvements, which renovates the total square footage is about 65,000, 66,000 square feet, and about 2/3 of that is renovated space at about 40,000 square feet, and then new addition at 25,000 square feet. At the South Elementary School, that's a new build of about 58,000 square feet. So again, these kind of are those improvements, some of those guiding principles, improvements that we're making at these sites, improving the flexibility for the flexible learning spaces and the activity for active learning and collaboration, supporting the new curriculum techniques, really locating those support services centrally in the building, so they're all clustered around one area, kind of towards the center of the building, and then improving the site security with the parking and the secure entrance, and then again improving the operational efficiency of the building just through new mechanical systems. So as we look at this building here, the kind of brown, reddish brown in the middle, that's the renovated space. That includes the gymnasium. The space is kind of around there, kind of going counterclockwise from about 10 o'clock there. You have kindergarten, pre-K in those larger classrooms. Those are already kindergarten, pre-K rooms. We're just refreshing them, giving them new systems, and really bringing them up to the standard of what you're going to expect to see in the rest of the new building. So those spaces were perfectly sized for that. We're going to keep those there. The media center right to the west of the gymnasium, that's actually getting split in half because we identified that's probably about twice as large as the current media center really needs to be. So half of it's going to remain media center, half of it's going to be the music classroom. And then as we come down to the south side, southeast side rather, there's a couple of Head Start classrooms and then your support space is kind of in that, again, that brown area. And then at the main entrance here on the south side, on the southeast corner of the building, you have that administration block. It's kind of located in this area. And then right above there is the commons, and that'll help provide kind of a pre-function space for not only the school, but also for if you have a gym activity, something going on in the gymnasium. It provides a little bit more circulation than the current entrance to the building off to the north for the gymnasium. On the east side of the building, we have 2 wings of classrooms with the STEAM area for collaborative learning located between the 2 wings. So the south wing is 1st and 2nd grade, as well as a flex classroom, and the north wing is 3rd through 5th. This is just kind of some ideas of what this potentially could look like, just to get a feel for the scale of the project. Again, in the upper left corner, there's kind of that darker roof. That's the existing building. All the lighter roof is kind of the new proposed additions with a separated bus traffic on the east side and the parent drop-off and parent visitor parking on the west side. Down here, we're looking kind of at that administrative offices, looking at some glazing, some natural light, bringing natural light into your common space. And then the big picture on the right there is kind of looking at that, what that main entrance potentially could look like with the administrative offices, again, providing that passive and active observation of the parking lot and the main entrance. At the south building, so this is on a greenfield site on the south side, south part of town. You have again, kind of the separated parking, bus drop-off, parent drop-off. It's a very similar concept with the main entrance, the secure vestibule, admin on the north side there, providing that passive active watching. You have that pre-function space, commons, lunchroom that's located just off of the main entrance there. And then your gymnasium is off to the bottom left there. Your academic wings all face east. And starting with pre-K kindergarten kind of on the top there with an adjacent playground located up in that corner. First through second, kind of in the middle wing, and then third through fifth on the south side there. I should have mentioned on the previous plan as well that there's opportunities at the end of each one of these hallways, the way they're set up, that if in the future one of these buildings does need to expand a classroom or two, there's space there where you can easily add a few thousand square feet to accommodate any kind of future growth. And then again, locating those support services in the center, your music rooms, your media center, special needs, those sorts of things are all kind of located centrally, so it's kind of equidistant from all the students in the building. Then we also have a service drive that will kind of come around the south side of the building. And then we also located a playground off of the parking lot, which would serve during the day really well, and then also for parent drop-off when after school and kids are out there waiting for their parents, they'd have a place to go and wait. So again, kind of just some preliminary what these buildings could look like. On the upper left, there we have the common space with some natural daylight, some glass letting some natural daylight into the common space. Our main entrance here on the bottom with some windows for your administrative offices, providing that passive active watching. And then kind of an overall view of what that potentially could look like from the northeast, looking at those three classroom wings. So, ballot question number 2 are expanded spaces at the high school location. So, providing classroom spaces for STEAM, so it's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Vocational, agricultural, automotive, and industrial tech edition, and a student fitness center, as well as providing some funding for some additional equipment and furnishings for those, not only those spaces, but also for your FACS commercial kitchen unit, and also for the media center to provide better furnishings for collaborative, flexible learning areas. One other item that's not noted on there that's part of this is some improved site work as well. We'd be refurbishing the existing tennis courts as part of this question, and then providing additional parking around the south side of the building, because during sporting events and events in the theater, the parking lot gets quite congested, so providing some additional parking there and another way out to back to the main road. So the additions kind of on the bottom right here is the fitness center. To the left, in the middle of the drawing, is the vocational agriculture addition, and then the STEAM addition is on the north side of the building. Okay, ballot question number 3. So this is to construct a new baseball, softball field complex with 2 baseball fields and 2 softball fields, some parking over at that location, and then a concessions and storage building located centrally to those 4 fields. And then also to construct a track and field complex with all-weather track surface, and then all your field events, making sure that they all have a home moving forward as well. And then some restroom and concessions and storage building as well for that location. So what we're looking at is to the west of the existing site, acquiring that land there to provide 2 softball fields and 2 baseball fields. Again, the parking will come off of the road to the west, and then there'd be a kind of connecting pathway that you could, like a walkway, that you could access those fields from. The 2 existing baseball fields will be converted to 3 practice fields for football, or any sports really, I guess. It's more about getting additional practice and green space out adjacent to the building. And then the track and field complex around the existing football field. Any opening after that? All right. Bill's going to come up and.
Thank you, Tony. So with every building model referendum, in addition to what we gain academically and space-wise and efficiency, there's a lot of questions always revolving around how much does it cost me? So in the brochure that was distributed and also in our PowerPoint presentation, we kind of gave some really basic examples. For a residential area and commercial, we used a $100,000 home. That can usually be converted fairly easily to determine what tax on another valuation is. So when you look at the project, the elementary portion, of the project was $37 million for that project. The high school academic was $4.8 million, and the athletic program was $5.5 million. And then in the first shaded area, the upper left shaded area, it provides an indication of what that tax obligation is, that liability is on a $100,000 home. So the annual amount for the elementary portion is $134 a year, or $11.17 per month. For the academic question, number 2, it's $18 annually and $1.50 per month. And for the athletic programs, it's $20 annually or $1.67. So all 3 questions combined, it's $172 on a $100,000 home annually and $1,433 if you calculate it monthly. The shaded block in the upper right, that's the tax impact for a commercial property. We used $100,000 again. And with that, the tax rate's a bit higher. It's about twice that. So on the elementary question, which involves North and South Elementary, it's $281 annually or $23.42 a month, $37 or $308, and $41 or $342 for question number 3. So that's the residential portion, commercial. And then in the bottom section, we look at the tax impact on homestead, ag property, and non-homestead ag property. And the figures that are shown here are after the ag credit is applied. And I'll talk more about the ag credit in just a slide or two. So with that, we looked at the tax on a homestead, and these are based on a valuation of $6,000 per acre. We have a later slide where we show $5,000, $6,000, and $7,000 increments. But for this one, we're using $6,000 per acre. So the cost for the elementary building is $225 or 18 cents per month per acre. The academic portion is 30 cents per acre annually, and the athletic program is 33 cents per acre annually is the cost for the homestead ag land. Now that doesn't include the house, the garage in 1 acre, that's classified as residential. So this is the actual farm-on portion away from that farmstead. And then for the tax impact on non-homestead for that $6,000 acre, the cost again is about double of the homestead portion. So the annual amount for the elementary portion is $449. The high school academic 59 cents, and for the athletic program is 66 cents, or a total of $574 per acre. So each one of these has a total limit that shows questions 1, 2, and 3 combined. The next slide, we looked at it a little bit differently. So we looked at not only the $100,000 home, we're showing the tax impact in these situations for all 3 questions combined. We didn't have them separated out. So for the 3 questions combined, the impact for taxes payable in 2022 on a $75,000 home, it's $108 annually or $9 monthly. $150, it's $302 annually or $25 per month. And you jump up to $500,000 home, it's $1,197 or $100 per month. So those are the projections provided to us by Baker Tilly, our financial advisor. The next one, commercial industrial, is the same kind of philosophy in which we're showing the annual amount of tax impact and the monthly amount as well. The valuations, we start again at $100,000, so it's $359 and $30. That's what was on a prior slide. You jump to $500,000 commercial property, it's $2,250 annually, or $185 a month. And if it's up to $5 million commercial property, it's $23,000, almost $24,000 annually, or $1981 per month on a $500,000 $5,000 property. And then the agricultural property, both homestead and non-homestead are identified here. And this is what the taxes will be payable in 2022, and that's with a 60% ag tax credit. And if we go to the following years, year 2 through year 20, the tax impact drops. So when we look at $5,000 an acre, that cost is $239. And for 6,000 is 287, 7,000 is 335. That's for all 3 questions. And then non-homestead, it's 478, 575, and 671. So it gives you an indication of where those tax rates would be at various denominations of property value. This, we go into some slides now that represent the tax credit, and I'd like you to look first at the pie chart over here. The red portion is the portion with this bond question that would apply to the agricultural property impact. So about 75% of this project would be paid by owners of agricultural property. So when we look at that, the amounts for the questions as the bonded amounts, it's a total of $47 million. And as we look across on that, we see that the ag land of that $47 million, about $35 million of that is to be based upon the ag property. And about $11 million or $11.5 million is based upon residential and commercial. Personal property is just under $1 million, and the ag to school credit is 0. So now when that ag credit is applied, and this is for year 1 of this, when it's a 60% ag credit, after that's applied, it's still the same valuation here, but the difference here drops from $34,900 to $10,600. So I mean, that's a substantial discount, because the ag property goes from being 75% of the project to about 22% of the project. And people have asked me, well, why don't other people get that reduction also? Well, the state legislature back in 2016 or 2015, when they first started talking about this, they recognized that ag property doesn't necessarily mean wealth. It's a valuation, but it's a dollar amount fixed on property, but it doesn't always guarantee income. And they recognize the real disparity between who pays for this in the rural areas. So when there's a building bond referendum, the burden fell heavily upon the rural taxpayer, the ag landowner. So the process began with an incremental start where the ag credit started at 40, went to 50, then to 55, then to 60, and then to 70. So right now we're about 2022 would be the last year of the 60% ag credit. Then it jumps to 70, and then it stays there through the life of the bond for the remaining years. So the pie chart on the right shows the reduction from about 75% of the obligation to ag to about 22%. The residential commercial is about 22%. But now what happens is that 52% of that project is paid by the state of Minnesota. So our farmers get a tax credit. So as this is calculated, we are getting income coming to West Central area that pays for more than 50% of our project. It pays for, on that bond amount, $24 million, and that comes from state income from across the state of Minnesota. As we look at this again, it's the exact same chart, same percentages, but this amount here shows 46,078. That's the cost of our elementary project plus interest over the 20-year period. And the next two figures show the cost of question 2 and question 3, the cost across the 20-year period. So it's got the principal amount plus the interest of that bond rate. But everything else is the same. The percentages are the same. So when we look at what the cost of this project would be for the principal, the bond amount plus the interest, it's just short of $59 million. But the ag credit on that is $13 million. The residential and commercial is $14 million. Personal property is $1.2 million. And then the state pays $30 million, over $30 million, $30,200,000. So out of a project that's just short of $60 million, again, it's 52% that the state pays for this project. And The bond rates right now, so the Ag to School credit provides a great opportunity for communities such as the West Central area schools because of the large amount of property valuation within the school district. But the other advantage we have is interest rates. If you look at the high point right here, this is 4.5%. So when we go back to 2018, the interest rates were about 4.5%. So again, our financial advisor, Baker Tilly, has given us a projection which they're projecting out if there's a passage of a building bond referendum in November, if the voters say yes to the 3 questions, we'd be looking at selling bonds very early in next year, January, February. So they're projecting the rate at that time to be 2.14%. So that'd be the red line that they're showing. So this is 2.5. So when they're looking at what that projection would be, this is for 8/19/21 is how far the graph goes. But we are at historically low rates for interest. And we have to go a number of years back before we ever get to that level again. So from a bond standpoint, very good financial condition for the district.
Okay, so as a reminder, voting is conducted by mail-in ballots. Ballots should already be in mailboxes. If you don't have your ballot, check to make sure that you are a registered voter, and you can do that through this website that's listed on here. If you are registered and for some reason your ballot didn't get to you, you can call the district office at the high school. There's very specific instructions with the ballots, so make sure and pay attention to that. And then if you have election-specific questions, you can direct those to the district office with the address here or with the email that's listed. So that kind of wraps up the information that we're going to present tonight, and I think what we'll do is go into question and answer if you're ready, Deb.
Yeah, are there any other questions? First of all, I should see, is this loud enough? Can you hear my voice? Okay, so we'll collect questions, and we'll kind of do group them. And I would remind people that that I appreciate if you're asking one question per card, that's helpful. And you're also putting the number of the question on the card. Again, that just kind of helps with the organizing. And if you need more cards at any point, just raise your hand, and then maybe Michelle or someone could kind of get that out to you so that you can ask a question. And what we're doing here is that we're grouping like questions together, and that's just to ensure that all questions can be answered. And they're, as Mr. Superintendent Hoge said before, that kind of helps, they're just grouped together and you can kind of cover all of the same thing at the same time. Now, civility and respect are key to a successful evening of getting questions asked and answered. And questions should be about the ballot questions and not personal attacks on board members or school staff or community members. And so if we see any of those, we will not read those. So these should all be pertaining to the 3 questions that are on the ballot. Okay? So we'll just start in no particular order, but just a clarification question. Someone had asked, how come there are no on-duty sheriffs here? Yeah, Sheriff Haber was here, but he must have been called out.
We had asked the Sheriff's Department of Grand County and of Douglas County to have a presence here, and Sheriff Haber said that they would like to schedule someone to be here, and I'm not sure what their schedule is particularly tonight. But he was here and he's in the vicinity.
Here's some questions about the choice of the south location. You noted a positive of Hoffman was flat land. What about the baseball field that was going to be donated in K-Town? I'll repeat that. You noted a positive of the Hoffman site was flat land. What about the baseball field that was going to be donated in Kensington?
Well, the first decision that was made by the board, or one of the early decisions, was not to use or renovate the South Elementary. And then as we began to look at it, we looked at factors that impact both Kensington and Hoffman and what impacts the school district in a favorable setting. So what we discussed was where would the best location be, which town. So we looked at properties around both Kensington and also around Hoffman, And with the consideration that Michelle pointed out with the concentric graphs showing population, it really appeared that the best location would be in Hoffman. We also talked about the economic condition of Hoffman, where they've had the highest increases in comparison to Kensington in population, property valuation, and business parcels. So it looked like it was a community that was moving along well without a school there. So now when we looked at the location, the question about comparison of the property, Hoffman got to be the preferred site as far as these factors that were taken into consideration. So along with that, we looked at, okay, there was an offer of the baseball field in Kensington to be donated to the school district for use. The acreage of that would have been, of that area, as you go through that, would have been about 8 acres. I think that's close to what that estimate was. So you combine that with the 2.5 acres on the opposite side of the road, you have a total of 10.5 acres, which would be close to the 12 that MDE guideline is. And again, their recommendations are guidelines. But when you look at splitting the playground or the parking on the other side of the road, and probably the second busiest road in Kensington, the valuation the board looked at on what's a better opportunity, Hoffman really appeared to be the better opportunity. The agreement with the property owner, contingent on passage of a referendum, is just short of $200,000. So when you look at the value of that and the comparison to the donated property, it still was deemed of value by the school board that they wanted to pursue an agreement with the property owner of the Hoffman property. So that's how that decision was come to. And you know, there's also with that opportunity, it's a complete 12-acre parcel, provides an opportunity to design the school and place it in that location in the area or the proximity that you want. Michelle?
Yeah, there's a couple of other things that play a role in that too. With moving the location to Hoffman, it puts our buildings 7 and 7 miles apart from each other. So there is the ability to add on and expand the location in Hoffman, just like the location at North Elementary. That obviously would likely require us to go back out for a bond vote. So in looking at enrollment, if we get overloaded in one elementary school over another, it does give the opportunity for kids that are located between Hoffman and Barrett to consider North Elementary if they want to, and between Elbow Lake and Barrett to consider South Elementary if they want to. It does also decrease drive distance for our faculty and staff that are transitioning between the 3 different buildings, sometimes happening multiple times a day.
Okay, the next question. Has the board or Superintendent Hoagie reviewed the evaluation that was done by Engen Associates on the current South building? I'll repeat. Has the board or Superintendent Hoagie reviewed the evaluation that was done by Engen Associates on the current South building?
I've gone through the evaluation, that assessment, yes.
I've gone through it extensively also. If there's a follow-up question, I'd encourage to submit it.
Okay, thank you. Kind of continuing with the sites, would question number 3 require more land to be purchased? For example, for the 2 new ball diamonds.
There is a contingent purchase agreement in place should question 3 pass.
Next question, again, it has to do with the sites. Has a bid been received from Otter Tail to get power if a new building were to be put in Hoffman? Has a bid been received from Otter Tail to get power if a new building were to be put in Hoffman?
Costs for utilities up to the building are included when the total bond cost is taken into consideration, but the bidding process doesn't actually occur until after there's a successful passage of the question.
Now we have a series of questions that have to do with building, basically the building and the building design. This is with question 1. It seems the real issue with the current buildings is design, not anything related to the potential for remodeling or / upgrading the current buildings. Is this true? I'll repeat. It seems the real issue with the current buildings is design, not anything related to the potential for remodeling or upgrading. the current buildings. Is this true?
I may not fully understand that question, so if I don't answer this, whoever submitted that, you can resubmit another question. But the way that we deliver education today has definitely changed from the way that we delivered education 20 or 30 years ago. So we talk about out of space. I'll use Kensington as an example, and that building sits on about 2.5 acres. There's people that walked the halls of that school that may not have been in it for a while, and they think, how could you possibly be out of space? We've added on programs like 3-year-old preschool, which takes a classroom, 4-year-old preschool, which takes a classroom, made space for special education where we don't have designated space. We've tried to find pockets of space where professionals can come in and work one-on-one with kids. It's like playing Tetris in that building. So to an extent, yes, it's programming, but that's, I don't know if you want to add on to that, Mr. Hoagie, because I think I understand the question, but.
This isn't necessarily one or the other. It's not programming and it's not the building facility. When I had started at WCA, we looked at a number of options for construction, and we looked at the physical aspects first, is what we discussed first. And we talked about the buildings, we talked about evaluation or assessment that came from UNESCO. So we looked at what those projections were and what the deficiencies were within the north building and also in the south building. And then when you start to look at what does it cost to address those deficiencies in comparison to new construction, you start to get an idea that, boy, how much money do you start putting into the building? And that's one of the things that the board was already talking about is do we want to do any of these major repairs or improvements at south or at north when we're not sure where we're going to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, or 5 years from now. So they would do the things that absolutely needed to be done to provide for health and safety and just for maintenance of mechanical systems and structural needs. So when the question is asked, if kind of leading to one or the other, it's not one or the other, it gets to be a combination. So now when we knew that there were structural needs, now we start looking at, okay, when we have a facility that's beyond its life expectancy and needs a substantial amount of repair, are the academic spaces conducive to what we're doing today? So what we found is we had rooms that were oversized, we had rooms that were undersized. So now when you start moving walls during that renovation process, it gets to be more expensive. So looking at the cost of renovation completely of south or completely of north, the board ruled those out. So prior to the 2020 referendum, the board had narrowed it down to 2 options. One was a new south building with an unspecified location, and then renovation and new construction at north, just as in the proposal now. And the other option at that time was to go to one site in Barrett, and by a vote of 4 to 3, it was put on the ballot to pursue a one-site option. So that process of getting to renovation or new construction was something that took several months to make a determination. But it was both academic related and structural related.
Thank you. The next question is, have the increased building costs been taken into account for the cost of remodeling and building new? Have the increased building costs been taken into account for the cost of remodeling and building new?
Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I'll answer that. We have factored that in. Obviously, the market is pretty volatile right now, but we feel that we've compensated for the increase in costs for steel and concrete and that stuff. So we think that we have numbers that would support construction costs for the spring of concrete.
Okay, the next question. Is it true the final design of the remodel and new buildings could be very different than the designs that are presented here tonight? Repeating. Is it true the final design of the remodeled and new buildings could be very different than the designs that are presented here tonight?
I think conceptually what you were saying was not designs. You were saying what could this look like? You know, at the end of the day, the hard work that gets put in as far as design goes happens after a successful passing of a bond vote. But the direction to Mr. Hoagie, the direction to Zerberg, the direction to Gertz has been very specific about what we want the program to look like.
Okay. All right. The next questions are more with sort of the tax impact. How is is the commercial rate calculated, and why is it higher than the residential rate? How is the commercial rate calculated, and why is it higher than the residential rate?
That decision on the valuations and the rates applied to whether it's commercial, residential, personal property, ag homestead, ag non-homestead, that's state statute. So for me to answer that, I'm not able to tell you. Those are just the figures that are established, by the state.
And then kind of a clarification question. How much of the 4 million plus is connected to the fitness center and tennis courts? So how much of the, and for question 2, how much of 4 million plus is connected to the fitness center and the tennis courts?
About $715,000 for the fitness center, and I think we had about 60 to 80,000 for the tennis courts. Basically, that's refurbishing, new fence, new surface, trying to work with what's existing in place there, but just improving it.
And I got the same base figures for Tony of $715,000 and about $80,000 for the tennis court, but then you have to tack on the other associated fees with that too, so it'll be a little higher than that. But based upon the square footage, 2,700 square feet for the fitness center, and we had about $700,000 to $800,000.
Thank you. The next question is about student demographics, in particular for question 1. The number of students within 1 mile of Kensington seems unreal, 19. Have you validated that number is really accurate? The number of students within 1 mile of Kensington seems unreal at 19. Have you validated that number? Have you validated that number is really accurate?
If I remember right, that number was based off of actual enrollment when we pulled it, correct?
Actual enrollment when we pulled it, and it's the K through 5 enrollment for that area.
The next couple of questions have to do with the voting process. Does the board see the perception problem with having people from the school and connected to a vote yes group counting the votes? Does the board see the perception problem with having people from the school and connected to a vote yes group counting the votes?
We don't have school personnel that are counting the votes. The board passed a resolution last Wednesday. They elected a ballot board of 5 members. None of those are school board members, none are school employees. The ballots come in a sealed envelope. It is the ballot board that opens the envelopes. It's the ballot board that makes a determination whether it's a valid ballot or not. And it's that ballot board that does the counting. School personnel are not involved in that counting process.
It's the previous election judges that have operated in that role in the past that are not school personnel.
Thank you. The next question, can ballots be dropped at the school anytime up to November 2nd or only on that day? Repeating, can ballots be dropped at the school anytime up until November 2nd or only on that day?
They can be dropped at any point in time. What's going to happen is that it has to be documented when the ballot's received. So when you drop it off at the district office, she's going to sign a document that says that she received the ballot and the date and the time that she took that ballot. It goes into a secured lockbox for when the judges decide that they're going to take those ballots out, open them, inspect them, and either reject or accept them.
Okay, and the last question that we have on the table is dealing with question 2. And it asks, why not give people a chance to vote on a pure education option? Do STEM or STEAM investment without anything connected to athletics? I'm going to repeat, why not give people a chance to vote on a pure education option? Do STEAM or STEM investment without anything connected to athletics?
I think, kind of going back to, we've got 3 separate ballot questions. So the third ballot question is the athletics question. That's the one that addresses adequate space for, we've got 3 baseball teams, we've got 2 active fields right now. We've got 3 softball teams, we've got 2 active fields right now. We've got multiple football teams all the way down to 90 nights, and we've got 1 football field. So question 3 is the athletics question. What's a little bit confusing is that student fitness space and the renovation of the tennis court is built into question 2. That's built in because those are spaces that are going to be utilized by our students through physical education. Obviously with like the fitness space, you might see sports teams or strength training or things like that that happen, but really wanting to instill lifelong healthy habits into our students. The fitness space gives programming there. It also gives the ability, if we wanted to bring in physical therapy through Heartland, who has been interested in doing that, to do physical therapy on site. It doesn't have to be a child that had a sports accident. It could be any parent that wants to use Heartland, but we'd have the space to be able to do physical therapy services on site. And then with the tennis courts, right now we co-op tennis with Morris. That may not always be, but it's the way that we've operated for the last several years. So our tennis courts would primarily be used by physical education, and one of the requests was to incorporate pickleball there too. That's becoming more popular, but that would be the reasoning for why the tennis courts and the fitness center were in question 2, which sometimes people associate with sports.
Okay, we have some additional questions. The first couple are going to be more on the taxes and impact. How many years will this extra tax liability be in effect? How many years will this extra tax liability be in effect?
Would start in 2022 and it would go for 20 years.
Thank you. Question 3, does the Michelle.
Sorry, they were asking a clarification question.
20 years.
Thank you. This is with question 3. Does the $5 million price include the cost of buying the land for baseball fields?
Yes, it does.
Can funds be reallocated if next year's levy doesn't pass? Can funds be reallocated if next year's levy doesn't pass?
No, Michelle showed the 3 questions, and what the board is seeking is your approval on those 3 questions. So they're very specific about how they're to be used, and it can't be used for other purposes. There are some times in which you write in contingencies that you're going to cover that base amount, and questions 2 and 3 address improving other areas within the site and the building at the secondary school. So it can go there, but you can't divert it to general fund use or other purposes. It's got to be used as for a construction project.
There's some specific rules that we have to adhere to when it comes to how ballot questions are placed on the ballot. So for example, and I haven't gotten that this year, but last year one of the questions was when the single site was up for consideration was, why can't you put on there, do you want 3 sites or do you want 1 as the ballot question? And attach prices to that. We're not allowed to. The questions have to be very specific and clearly explain what those funds, if voters approve the use of those funds, go towards.
Okay. The next question has, it's more of student demographics. How come newborn children are not included in Kensington's numbers? How come newborn children are not included in Kensington's numbers?
When we looked at all the enrollment figures, we looked at the enrollment figures that we had that started pre-K and went through our senior class. When we looked at the concentric circles, we used the kindergarten through 5 enrollment because that would be that group of students that would be enrolled there. We did not do a consensus or a census taking to look at how many 4-year-olds we had, 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, or newborns. So when we looked at the different age groups, whether we went K through 2 or 3 through 5, I think we went 7 through 8 and 9 through 12. When we looked at all those groups and broke them down, that percentage was very consistent across the board when we look at the comparison of Hoffman to Kensington enrollments.
And then the last question at this point, who are the election judges? Who are the election judges?
I don't have the names memorized. Darren, do you have that on your phone by chance?
Pam Olson, Pam Lawson. There was one from rural Kensington. There was who was the clerk in Hoffman at one time?
At Lawson?
Okay, you got that one.
I don't know,
There was,
I don't remember the fifth one.
there was basically one from each kind of spot in the district for the most part. Two of them were our rural Elbow Lake area, one Hoffman.
But,
It's not a resolution we got, so it's not on it.
right. So if you want the specific names, I'd recommend calling Chrissy Oakes. I unfortunately was not super familiar with the people that are election judges, so can't recall the names specifically.
it would be on our website also under the agenda for last Wednesday, which was the 6th. So we had approval to approve the election judges at that time. They were mentioned, however, in the agenda explanation, so rather than in the agenda itself, I think. Michelle's right, contact Chrissy Oakes District Office, and she can provide you the 5 names.
Those are the questions that we have.
Any more? If not, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you also, and thank you for assisting us tonight. Thank you.
All that are on the table. You realize. Yeah. And before you was coming, get a little bit.
Get your questions in? Yeah, I think it is.
How are you? Good, how are you? Good, good. Trying to stay out of trouble.
Oh, yeah. That's so I totally meant to. Yeah, I think.
I don't know. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah.
Good.
Might as well.